The war had raged for so long that most had forgotten how it began. Across the ink-black void of space, humanity and the Cerinthians, a race of crystalline, bioluminescent beings, had turned entire star systems into graveyards. Captain Elias Thorne, a decorated yet disenchanted pilot of the Terran Alliance, had been part of the struggle for over a decade. He had seen enough destruction to last several lifetimes, and yet here he was, flying headlong into the most dangerous mission of his career. The briefing had been simple, at least on paper. Retrieve Queen Renalis of the Cerinthians from enemy custody. Bring her back alive. The words had echoed in Elias's mind as he piloted his sleek, matte-black frigate, the Eclipse Dawn, toward the enemy outpost. It wasn't bravery that had compelled him to volunteer, but a strange mix of guilt and exhaustion. If rescuing the Queen meant even a slim chance of ending this war, it was worth the risk. As the Eclipse Dawn approached the outpost, its AI herald broke the silence. Captain, I've run the calculations. The probability of survival for this mission is approximately 17.3%. Would you like me to play an inspiring playlist, or perhaps engage in a motivational monologue? Elias snorted. How about you just focus on keeping us invisible? Ah, deflecting with humor. A classic coping mechanism, Harold replied, his tone maddeningly cheerful. The Cerinthian outpost loomed ahead, a jagged construct of dark crystal and pulsing light nestled within the gravitational eddies of a dying star. The structure seemed alive, its surface shifting like the ripples of a disturbed pond. Elias had never seen anything like it, and for a moment he felt a pang of awe. Beautiful, isn't it? Harold remarked. Almost a shame we're here to crash their party. Focus, Harold. The Eclipse Dawn slipped into the outpost's outer defenses, its cloaking field shimmering like heat haze. Elias's hands moved over the controls with practiced precision, but tension coiled in his chest. The Cerinthian guards were no pushovers, and their technology often seemed more magic than science. Harold chimed again. Captain, I must say your heart rate is elevated. Shall I suggest some calming breathing exercises? Harold, if I survive this, I'm rewriting your personality matrix, Elias muttered. The frigate settled silently in a shadowed docking bay. Elias donned his combat suit, a sleek exoskeleton equipped with adaptive camouflage and a suite of gadgets designed for infiltration. As he activated the suit, Harold's voice crackled in his helmet. Good luck, Captain. Remember, if you perish, I'll compose a suitably tragic haiku in your honor. Elias rolled his eyes and stepped into the alien stronghold. The interior of the outpost was as unsettling as its exterior. Shifting corridors glimmered with dim, iridescent light, and the walls emitted a faint hum as if the structure were alive and watching. Elias moved cautiously, his adaptive camouflage blending seamlessly with his surroundings. He followed the faint signal from his scanner, which led him to a chamber deep within the outpost. There, suspended in a containment field, was Queen Renalis. Her translucent crystalline body glowed faintly, though her light was dimmer than the vibrant depictions Elias had seen in intelligence briefings. She was injured. Fissures marred her elegant form, and her light flickered weakly. Elias hesitated, struck by a strange sense of reverence. This was no ordinary being. She radiated an aura of majesty, even in her weakened state. Captain, Harold whispered in his earpiece, her containment field is linked to the outpost's power core. Deactivating it may trigger alarms. Elias sighed. Of course it will. Nothing's ever simple, is it? Simple missions are for simple people, Captain. You, however, are delightfully complex. Ignoring the AI's commentary, Elias moved to the control panel. His fingers danced over the alien interface, deciphering its strange symbols. The containment field flickered, and a low, ominous hum filled the chamber. Harold, I think we just triggered something. Indeed, Captain. Sensors indicate multiple life forms converging on your location. Shall I prepare the self-destruct sequence for a dramatic exit? Not yet, Elias snapped, hoisting the unconscious queen onto his shoulders. The corridors erupted with light as Cerinthian guards closed in. Elias sprinted, his camouflage flickering as energy blasts ricocheted around him. He returned fire with precision, though his main focus was escape. "Harold, get the Eclipse Dawn ready for takeoff." "Already on it, Captain. Might I suggest a faster pace? Your current speed leaves much to be desired." Elias gritted his teeth, adrenaline surging as he reached the docking bay. He stumbled aboard the frigate, depositing the Queen gently in the medbay before racing to the cockpit. The Eclipse Dawn roared to life, its engines flaring as it shot out of the docking bay. Enemy ships gave chase, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the starlight. "Harold, engage the cloaking field." "Cloaking field engaged. Shall I also cue up a victory fanfare?" "Let's survive first," Elias muttered, steering the frigate through the treacherous gravitational currents of the dying star. Moments stretched into eternity as Elias weaved through the pursuing ships. Finally, the Eclipse Dawn slipped into the safety of warp space. Elias leaned back in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. "Harold, remind me to never volunteer for something like this again." "Duly noted, Captain, though I suspect your penchant for heroics will override your better judgment." Elias allowed himself a weary smile. In the medbay, the Queen's light flickered faintly, a fragile promise of hope. The hum of the Eclipse Dawn was the only sound that filled the ship, a low, steady rhythm that seemed to echo the pulse of the universe itself. Captain Elias Thorne sat in the medbay, staring at the translucent figure of Queen Renalis as she rested in a containment pod. The alien Queen's glow had grown slightly brighter since their escape, but her condition remained fragile. Harold's voice broke the silence. "Captain, if I may offer a suggestion, staring won't expedite her recovery. Unless, of course, humans have developed some form of healing through sheer awkwardness." Elias rubbed his temples. "Thanks, Harold. Your bedside manner is as impeccable as ever." "Why, thank you. I do strive for perfection," Harold quipped. Elias leaned back, letting out a slow breath. It had been a harrowing escape, but the real challenge was just beginning. The Queen's survival was critical, not just for ending the war, but because Elias found himself strangely moved by her. Her fragile, otherworldly form was a stark reminder that beneath the alien armor and crystalline glow was someone who had suffered greatly, just like any human would. The containment pod emitted a soft chime, and the Queen stirred. Her eyes, faceted like cut gemstones, flickered open. For a moment they glowed with a brilliance that made Elias feel like a child staring at the stars for the first time. "Where am I?" Her voice was musical, though tinged with confusion. "You're aboard the Eclipse Dawn," Elias replied. "My ship. We're safe, for now." Her gaze sharpened. "You are human." Elias nodded. "Guilty as charged, and you're the Queen of the Cerinthians. Quite the icebreaker, isn't it?" Her expression softened slightly, though her posture remained regal even in her weakened state. "You saved me." "Well," Elias said with a wry smile, "it was either that or let you rot in enemy hands, and I'm not much for leaving people behind." She studied him intently, as though trying to decipher a complex puzzle. "Why would you risk so much for me, for an enemy?" "Enemy's a strong word," Elias said, leaning against the medbay console. "Let's just say I'm tired of this war, and saving you seemed like a good first step toward ending it." The Queen's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Your actions are unexpected." "Unexpected's my middle name," Elias quipped. "Well, not literally, that would be terrible. It's actually Marcus, but that's not nearly as exciting." To his surprise, the Queen let out a soft, bell-like laugh, though it quickly turned into a wince. "Careful," Elias said, stepping closer. "You're not exactly in top shape." Over the next few days, Elias and the Queen developed an uneasy camaraderie. While she recovered in the medbay, he divided his time between tending to her and ensuring the Eclipse Dawn stayed off the radar of both human and Cerinthian forces. The ship's AI, Harold, quickly became a third member of their odd little group. He seemed to take particular delight in observing their interactions. "Captain," Harold announced one morning, "did you know that prolonged exposure to Cerinthian bioluminescence can induce a mild sense of euphoria in humans? Fascinating, isn't it?" Elias frowned. "Are you suggesting I'm enjoying this too much?" "I'm merely stating the facts. Though, if I may add, your heart rate does tend to spike during your conversations with her." Elias groaned. "Harold, remind me to install a mute button for you." Queen Renalis, who had been listening quietly, tilted her head. "Your machine has a peculiar personality." "You have no idea," Elias said. Harold chimed in. "I prefer to think of myself as charmingly eccentric." As Queen Renalis regained her strength, she began to share glimpses of her world. The Cerinthians, she explained, were a race deeply connected to the energy of the cosmos. Their crystalline bodies acted as conduits for starlight, and their society revolved around the harmonious balance of light and shadow. Elias listened with rapt attention, occasionally breaking the solemnity with a well-timed joke. "So, you're basically living glow sticks?" The Queen raised an elegant eyebrow. "Glow sticks? It's a human thing. I'll explain later." Despite the humor, Elias found himself increasingly fascinated by her. The Queen wasn't just a symbol of power. She was a living, breathing being with hopes, fears, and a quiet strength that he couldn't help but admire. One evening, as they sat in the ship's observation deck, watching the stars streak by, the Queen turned to Elias. "You carry much burden," she said softly. Elias, caught off guard, chuckled. "You could say that. Comes with the territory, I guess." "But why do you fight?" she asked, her gaze piercing. "What drives you to risk your life for a cause you seem to resent?" Elias hesitated, staring out at the endless expanse of space. "I guess I fight because someone has to. Because if I don't, who will? But honestly, most days, I'm just trying to make it to the next one." The Queen studied him, her expression inscrutable. "You are unlike any human I have encountered." "Yeah, well, I like to keep people guessing." Her laughter was soft, like the tinkling of wind chimes. "You are amusing, Elias Thorne." "And you're not half bad yourself," he replied with a grin. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Elias felt a flicker of something he hadn't known he'd lost: hope. The Cerinthian homeworld was unlike anything Captain Elias Thorne had ever imagined. As the eclipse dawn emerged from warp space, it was greeted by a vista that defied human comprehension. A planet suspended within a radiant nebula, its surface shimmering with hues of sapphire, amethyst, and gold. Towering spires of crystalline structures pierced the atmosphere, refracting the nebula's light in dazzling patterns. Rivers of liquid starlight flowed across the landscape, winding their way through verdant valleys of alien flora that seemed to hum with life. Elias whistled softly, his usual irreverence tempered by genuine awe. "Well, Harold, I think I just found the universe's best postcard." "Indeed, Captain," Harold replied, his tone unusually contemplative. "The probability of humanity creating anything this aesthetically pleasing is statistically negligible." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Elias muttered, his gaze still fixed on the breathtaking view. Behind him, Queen Renalis stepped into the cockpit, her presence as commanding as ever despite her recent recovery. The glow of her crystalline form seemed to resonate with the light of her homeworld, and for a moment, Elias thought she looked almost whole. "Welcome back," he said, gesturing toward the planet. "Looks like your people know a thing or two about architecture." Renalis's lips curved into a faint smile. "Cerenthia is more than a home. It is a living entity, a symphony of light and energy. Every structure, every element, is in harmony with the cosmos." "Sounds poetic," Elias said, his tone light. I'm guessing your city zoning laws are a nightmare, though. Her smile deepened, a small yet genuine reaction that made Elias feel oddly accomplished. As the eclipse dawn descended toward the capital city, Elias couldn't help but notice the Cerinthian ships shadowing their approach. Sleek and angular, the vessels moved with a fluidity that seemed more organic than mechanical. "Friendly escort, or should I start warming up the evasive maneuvers?" he asked. "They are cautious," Renalis replied. "It is not every day that a human ship enters our skies. Your presence will raise questions." "Questions I'm happy to answer," Elias said with a shrug, "though I'm not sure they'll like the answers." The ship landed gently on a crystalline platform, the ground beneath it shimmering as though alive. A delegation awaited them, a mix of Cerinthian council members and guards, their forms as regal and luminous as Renalis's. As Elias disembarked, he felt the weight of 100-faceted eyes on him. The Cerinthians studied him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, their glowing forms casting shifting patterns of light across the platform. "Well," he muttered to himself, "nothing like making a first impression." "Remember, Captain," Harold whispered through his earpiece, "a smile is universal. Unless, of course, they interpret it as a threat." Elias resisted the urge to roll his eyes and instead offered a polite nod. Inside the grand hall of the Cerinthian Council, the atmosphere was tense. The chamber was a marvel of alien design, with walls that seemed to shift and pulse in rhythm with the voices of the assembled council members. Renalis stood at the center, her presence commanding respect even among her own kind. "This human risked his life to ensure my safety," she began, her voice steady and regal. "Without him, I would not stand before you today." The council murmured, their crystalline forms shifting subtly as they communicated through both words and light. One of the counselors, a tall figure with a deep indigo glow, stepped forward. "And yet he is human. Their kind has brought us great suffering. How can we trust him?" Elias decided to speak before the room's mood soured further. "Trust is earned. I get that," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I didn't come here to fight. I came here to help end this war. And if saving your queen doesn't count for something, then I guess I'm in the wrong room." The counselor's gaze narrowed, but another smaller figure with a soft golden glow interjected. "Perhaps we should listen to him. His actions speak louder than our fears." The debate continued, with tension rising and falling like the tides. Throughout it all, Elias kept his tone measured, occasionally lightening the mood with carefully placed humor. When one counselor accused him of having ulterior motives, he quipped, "If I had a grand plan, it probably wouldn't involve sneaking into enemy territory and dodging plasma fire." To his surprise, a few counselors chuckled, a sound like chiming glass. After the council adjourned, Renalis approached Elias. "You handled yourself well," she said, her tone warm. "Thanks," he replied, "though I think I've officially set the record for awkward introductions." Renalis tilted her head. "Awkward, perhaps, but effective." As they walked back to the eclipse dawn, Elias felt a strange sense of accomplishment. The road ahead would be far from easy, but for the first time, he felt that peace might actually be within reach. "Captain," Harold said, breaking the quiet, "might I suggest a celebratory toast? I could replicate a fine Cerinthian luminescent tea." Elias smirked. "I'll pass, Harold, but thanks for the offer." The AI's tone was mock hurt. "Your lack of appreciation for my culinary creativity is duly noted." Elias glanced at Renalis, who was watching their exchange with quiet amusement. "See what I have to deal with?" he said, gesturing at the ship. Her laughter was soft but genuine, a sound that carried a hint of hope. The crystalline city of Cerintharia, its luminescent towers and flowing rivers of starlight, pulsed with a quiet energy that seemed to mirror the growing tension within the Queen's private chamber. Elias Thorne stood at the center of the room, his well-worn leather boots scuffing against the impossibly smooth floor that shimmered like polished ice. Opposite him, Queen Renalis was flanked by two of her most trusted advisors. Her regal posture remained steady, but there was a flicker of apprehension in her gaze. "Your suggestion," one advisor, glowing a sharp crimson, said to Elias, "borders on folly. A joint mission between humans and Cerinthians? Unthinkable." "Unthinkable doesn't mean impossible," Elias countered, arms crossed. "It just means no one's had the guts to try it yet." The crimson advisor's glow brightened, an indication of his frustration. "Your species has brought only destruction. Why should we risk our own to join forces with you?" Elias shrugged, adopting a casual air he hoped would mask his nerves. "Because we're all running out of options. You've seen what the Syndicate is capable of. They don't care if you're Cerinthian or human. They'll destroy anyone who gets in their way. Unless we work together, this war won't have any survivors. Just ashes." The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of Cerinthian energy coursing through the walls. Renalis studied him, her gemstone-like eyes catching the light as though weighing the truth in his words. "And yet," she said finally, her voice calm but firm, "the risk remains. Both sides will resist such an alliance. Trust is not easily earned, Captain Thorne." "True," Elias admitted. "But if you've got a better idea, I'm all ears. Or faceted crystalline auditory sensors, whatever works." Rhinalis's lips quirked upward in a faint smile, though her advisors remained stoic. Later that evening, Elias found himself on one of Cerentheria's many floating balconies, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The city below was alive with light and movement, its inhabitants glowing softly as they carried out their lives. It was a surreal sight, and for a moment, Elias allowed himself to feel small, a single human in a vast alien world. "You seem troubled," Renalis's voice broke the quiet. Elias turned to find her standing behind him, her form radiant against the night sky. "Troubled might be an understatement," he said with a chuckle. "I'm trying to convince an entire planet to trust a species they've been at war with. No pressure, right?" Renalis stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You carry this burden well, though I sense it weighs heavily on you." Elias exhaled, leaning against the balcony railing. "I've been in a lot of tough spots, but this is different. If we fail, it's not just my crew or a single mission, it's everything, everyone." For a moment, Renalis said nothing, her gaze fixed on the stars. Then, to Elias's surprise, she spoke softly, almost wistfully. "Do you know why the Cerinthians revere the stars so deeply?" He shook his head. "They are our ancestors," she said. "When a Cerinthian's physical form can no longer endure, their essence becomes one with the cosmos, joining the great tapestry of light. Every star you see," she gestured toward the sky, "is a part of us, a reminder that we are never truly alone." Elias was quiet for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle. Then he smiled faintly. "That's beautiful. And here I thought humans were the poetic ones." Rhinalis tilted her head, a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. "You have your moments, Captain." The next morning, Elias and Rhinalis convened with a small group of Cerinthian and human operatives, a tentative first step toward collaboration. The room buzzed with unease as the two groups sized each other up, their differences as stark as their distrust. "All right, everyone," Elias began, clapping his hands together. "Let's get one thing straight. None of us want to be here. But unless you've got a magic solution to stop the Syndicate, we're stuck with each other. So let's make it work." A Cerinthian operative, his glow a pale green, raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And how do you propose we make it work, human?" "Well," Elias said, grinning, "for starters, we could try not shooting each other. That'd be a nice change of pace." The room fell silent, and for a moment Elias thought he'd overstepped, but then one of the human operatives snorted, and soon a ripple of chuckles spread through the group. Even the green-glowing Cerinthian cracked a small smile. Renalis, standing beside Elias, allowed herself a quiet laugh. "Your humor is disarming, Captain." "Disarming's a good start," he replied. The meeting continued, with cautious exchanges of information and strategy. Both sides remained wary, but there were glimmers of understanding, a shared acknowledgement that the syndicate posed a threat too great for either side to face alone. By the time the meeting concluded, Elias felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him going. As the group dispersed, Harold's voice crackled through Elias's earpiece. "Captain, may I say that your ability to diffuse tension with humor is both impressive and mildly concerning?" Elias smirked. "What can I say? It's a gift." Renalis approached him as he prepared to leave. "Today was a beginning," she said. "That's one way to put it," Elias replied. "Now we just have to keep the momentum going." Renalis nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "You are unlike any human I have known, Elias Thorne." "And you're unlike any queen I've known," he said, grinning. Her laughter was soft but genuine, a sound that lingered in the air like the fading light of a distant star. For the first time in a long while, Elias allowed himself to believe that peace might actually be possible. The tension aboard the Eclipse Dawn was palpable as Elias Thorne and his eclectic team of Cerinthian and human operatives prepared for their first joint mission. The plan was simple in concept, but fraught with peril. Infiltrate a syndicate research station hidden deep within a pocket of fractured space known as the Veil. The station housed experimental weapons technology that could turn the tide of the war, if they could retrieve it. "Let's recap," Elias said, pacing in front of a holographic projection of the Veil. The swirling mass of distorted energy looked like a tempest frozen mid-motion, its tendrils of light twisting and writhing in eerie silence. "We slip through this lovely interdimensional death trap, grab the data, and get out before the syndicate realizes we were even there. Easy, right?" A human operative named Tessa, a fiery redhead with a penchant for sarcasm, raised an eyebrow. "Sure, Captain. Just like taking a stroll through a black hole." "Exactly," Elias shot her a grin. "Glad we're on the same page." The Cerinthian operative, Lyrian, whose pale violet glow seemed to ripple with restrained skepticism, interjected. "Your cavalier attitude does little to inspire confidence, Captain." Elias leaned on the edge of the holotable, meeting Lyrian's gaze with mock seriousness. "That's because I save my inspiring speeches for after we've survived. Don't want to jinx it." Beside him, Renalis stifled a smile, though her crystalline features betrayed a flicker of concern. "The Veil is treacherous," she said, her voice measured. "Its anomalies are unpredictable. We must proceed with utmost caution." Harold, ever the voice of dry humor, chimed in from the ship's speakers. "Captain, might I suggest adding Survive the Veil to our list of objectives? I calculate a 63% increase in morale if we set realistic expectations." "Noted, Harold," Elias said with a smirk. "Now everyone gear up. We've got a syndicate station to crash." As the Eclipse Dawn approached the Veil, the ship's hull groaned in protest against the gravitational distortions. The view from the cockpit was both mesmerizing and disorienting. Ribbons of light and shadow danced across the void, creating an illusion of endless depth. "Harold," Elias said, gripping the controls, "how's our little ship holding up?" "Structural integrity is stable for now," Harold replied, "though I'd advise against prolonged sightseeing." Tessa, strapped into the co-pilot seat, muttered, "Great. A haunted warp storm and a sarcastic AI. What could possibly go wrong?" "Plenty," Elias said cheerfully, "but let's not dwell on that." Navigating the Veil was akin to threading a needle in a hurricane. Spatial anomalies appeared without warning, their gravitational forces pulling at the ship like invisible hands. Elias's hands flew across the controls, his movements precise yet unhurried. "Lyrian," he called over his shoulder, "how's that anomaly scanner looking?" The Cerinthian's glow flickered as she studied her console. "Several distortions ahead, but there's a narrow path through. You'll need to adjust your heading by 3 degrees starboard." "Got it," Elias said, steering the ship through a tight gap between two swirling energy tendrils. As they neared the Syndicate station, the veil began to thin, revealing the dark silhouette of their target. The station was a sprawling structure, its design a harsh contrast to the organic beauty of Cerinthian architecture. Jagged spires jutted outward like claws, and its surface bristled with weaponry. "Well," Elias said, exhaling slowly, "there it is. Home sweet nightmare." The infiltration began with a quiet precision that surprised even Elias. Lyrian and Tessa worked together seamlessly, disabling external sensors and hacking into the station's docking protocols. Renalis led the team, her presence both commanding and calming as they moved through the station's dimly lit corridors. "Anyone else feel like we're walking into the belly of the beast?" Tessa whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the station's machinery. "Beasts are less predictable," Lyrian replied dryly. Elias stifled a laugh. "Glad to see you two bonding." As they reached the station's central data core, the team encountered their first real obstacle, a security grid bristling with Syndicate drones. The sleek, spider-like machines skittered along the walls, their glowing red eyes scanning for intruders. "Harold," Elias murmured into his comm, "how do we feel about hacking Syndicate tech today?" "Delighted, as always," Harold replied, "though I'd recommend distracting the drones unless you wish for a lively firefight." Elias nodded to Renalis. "Your Majesty, any bright ideas?" Renalis stepped forward, her crystalline form pulsing with light. With a graceful motion, she extended her hands, emitting a soft hum that resonated through the air. The drones froze, their movements stuttering, as if caught in an invisible web. "They respond to frequency modulation," Renalis explained. "I can disrupt their sensors, but only briefly." "Plenty of time," Elias said, gesturing for the team to move. "Let's grab what we came for." The data core was a towering construct of black metal and glowing circuitry, its design ominously efficient. Lyrian and Tessa worked quickly, extracting the necessary files, while Elias and Renalis kept watch. "Almost there," Tessa said, her fingers flying across the console. Elias glanced at Renalis. "So, how are we feeling about this alliance so far?" She tilted her head, a hint of amusement in her gaze. "Ask me again once we're off this station." Before Elias could respond, an alarm blared, its piercing sound reverberating through the chamber. "Looks like we're out of time," he said, drawing his weapon. "Everyone move." The team retreated through the station's corridors, Syndicate drones hot on their heels. Renalis's light shielded them from the worst of the assault, but the odds were growing increasingly dire. As they reached the docking bay, Elias turned to the group. "Harold, fire up the engines. We're bringing home company." The Eclipse Dawn roared to life, its thrusters flaring as the team scrambled aboard. "Captain," Harold said, his tone almost cheerful, "might I suggest a swift departure?" "On it," Elias said, slamming the throttle forward. The ship tore through the veil, Syndicate ships in pursuit. But as they reached open space, the Eclipse Dawn vanished in a burst of warp energy, leaving their enemies behind. Back on the ship, the team breathed a collective sigh of relief. "Well," Elias said, leaning back in his chair, "that went about as smoothly as expected." Renalis arched an elegant brow. "If this is your definition of smooth, I fear for the future." Elias grinned. "Welcome to the human experience." Her laughter, soft and genuine, was the perfect end to a harrowing day. The atmosphere aboard the Eclipse Dawn was a strange mix of tension and relief. Having narrowly escaped the Syndicate's pursuit, the crew turned their focus to the recovered data. The Syndicate's experimental weapon designs were more advanced than anyone had anticipated, and deciphering them would require careful analysis. In the quiet hum of the ship's main deck, Elias Thorne watched as Tessa and Lyrian pored over the glowing streams of alien code. Beside them, Renalis stood like a living sculpture of light, her crystalline form shimmering faintly in the dim room. "This looks less like weaponry and more like bad abstract art," Tessa muttered, rubbing her temples. Lyrian's glow flickered with amusement. Perhaps that is the intent. Confuse the enemy with poor aesthetics. Elias chuckled, leaning against the console. You know, I'd buy that theory if the syndicate wasn't so good at blowing things up. Harold's voice interjected from the overhead speakers, tinged with his signature dry humor. Captain, if I may, your penchant for deflection through humor is admirable. However, the gravity of this data suggests a more serious demeanor might be appropriate. Elias grinned. Noted, Harold, but I'll stick to what I'm good at. Hours later, Rhineless summoned Elias to the observation deck. The Queen stood at the massive viewport, her gaze fixed on the swirling colors of a nebula in the distance. Captain Thorne, she said as he approached, her voice unusually soft. Elias, he corrected, stopping beside her. What's on your mind? She hesitated, her crystalline hands clasped in front of her. This mission, this alliance, it stirs memories I thought long buried. Elias leaned against the railing, watching her carefully. Memories of what? Rhineless didn't respond immediately. Instead, she gestured to the nebula, its vibrant hues reflected in her multifaceted eyes. Do you know what this is? Besides breathtaking? No, Elias admitted. It is the remains of a star, long extinguished, she said. To the Cerinthian people, it is a symbol of renewal. From destruction, new life can emerge. But it is also a reminder of the cost of war. This nebula marks the site of one of our greatest battles, a victory, but at a price too great to celebrate. Elias frowned, sensing the weight behind her words. You lost someone there, didn't you? Rhineless nodded slowly. My sister. She was my anchor, my guide when I became queen. I'm sorry, Elias said sincerely. She believed, as you do, that alliances can be forged even in the face of hatred and mistrust. I carry her memory with me in all I do, but sometimes I wonder if her faith was misplaced. Elias reached out, his hand resting briefly on her arm. For what it's worth, I think she'd be proud of you. You're doing what you believe is right, even when it's hard. That's what leaders do. Rhineless turned to him, a faint smile gracing her lips. You are more than a soldier, Elias Thorne, perhaps more than even you realize. At the following day, the ship arrived at a neutral space station hidden within an asteroid field. Known as Obsidian Outpost, it was a haven for those who operated in the gray areas of galactic law, smugglers, informants, and the occasional disillusioned scientist. The crew's goal was to rendezvous with an informant who could help decode the syndicate's data. But as they disembarked, it became clear that the outpost was not the safe haven they had hoped for. Does it feel like everyone's staring at us? Tessa whispered, her hand hovering near her sidearm. Elias glanced around. The station's inhabitants, a motley mix of species, were indeed watching them with varying degrees of suspicion and hostility. Relax, he said, though his voice was low. We're just the newest oddity in a place full of them. Rhineless, her radiant form drawing even more attention, stepped closer to Elias. I suggest we complete our business quickly. Agreed, Elias said. Their contact, a wiry human named Marcus Venn, greeted them in a shadowy corner of the station's market district. His eyes darted nervously as he handed over a small device. This will decode the data, he said in a hushed tone. But be careful. It's not just the syndicate that's interested in it. Who else? Elias asked, frowning. Let's just say there are forces out there who like the balance of power the way it is, Marcus replied. Before Elias could press further, a commotion erupted nearby. A group of armored figures bearing the syndicate's insignia was moving through the market, their weapons drawn. Well, that's subtle, Tessa muttered. Time to go, Elias said, ushering the group back toward the docking bay. The chase through the outpost was both chaotic and strangely exhilarating. The crew darted through narrow alleys and crowded corridors, dodging syndicate patrols and the occasional irate merchant. At one point, Tessa tripped over a cart of glowing fruit-like objects, sending them rolling across the floor. "Watch your step," Elias called, grabbing her arm and pulling her upright. "Thanks," she said, then added with a smirk, "Next time I'll avoid the intergalactic produce aisle." They reached the docking bay just as the syndicate forces closed in. Elias turned to Renalis. "Think you can give us a light show?" The Queen nodded, her form brightening as she released a pulse of energy that temporarily blinded their pursuers. "Go!" she shouted, and the crew scrambled aboard the Eclipse Dawn. As the ship powered up, Harold's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, I trust your excursion was eventful?" "Let's call it educational," Elias replied, taking the pilot's seat. The Eclipse Dawn shot out of the docking bay, weaving through the asteroid field with practiced precision. Behind them, the syndicate ships struggled to follow, their larger frames ill-suited for the tight spaces. When they finally escaped into open space, Elias leaned back with a relieved sigh. "Well," he said, glancing at his crew, "I'd say that went about as smoothly as we could hope." Renalis arched an elegant brow. "Your definition of smooth continues to baffle me, Captain Thorne." Elias grinned. "It's an acquired taste." Her soft laughter filled the cockpit, a sound that lightened the tension in the air. For now, they were safe, and one step closer to unraveling the syndicate's plans. The bridge of the Eclipse Dawn hummed with an air of quiet anticipation. Elias Thorne sat in the captain's chair, his fingers steepled as he studied the holographic projection hovering before him. The decoded syndicate data had revealed something more troubling than anyone had expected. The syndicate's weapon wasn't merely destructive, it was a manipulator of gravity itself. If deployed, it could destabilize entire planets, collapsing them into lifeless husks. "So," Elias said, breaking the silence, "no pressure, right?" Tessa rolled her eyes from her station. "We've gone from rescuing a queen to saving entire planets. Are we aiming for a heroism award, or is this just a hobby for you?" "Why not both?" Elias shot back with a grin. He glanced at Renalis, whose luminous form stood motionless as she processed the gravity, both literal and metaphorical, of the situation. "This weapon threatens not just Cerinthians or humans, but the galaxy itself," she said, her voice steady. "If we fail, there will be no alliances left to build, only ruins." Elias gave her a reassuring smile. "Then we don't fail. Harold, what's our status?" The ship's AI chimed in with its usual dry wit. "Weapons systems are charged, shields are stable, and the probability of success is optimistic, assuming we proceed with your usual reckless ingenuity." "Harold," Elias said, standing up, "that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." The syndicate's stronghold orbited a dying star, a symbolic choice that wasn't lost on Elias. The star's flickering light painted the syndicate station in a grim, orange hue, giving it the appearance of a predator lurking in the shadows. The station's weapon, the gravimatrix core, was housed deep within its labyrinthine interior, protected by layers of automated defenses and syndicate troops. As the Eclipse Dawn approached, Elias turned to his crew. "Here's the plan. Tessa and Lyrian will infiltrate the station to disable its defenses. Renalis and I will head straight for the gravimatrix core and make sure it never sees the light of day. Harold, you'll keep the ship ready for a quick getaway." Tessa raised a hand. "And by make sure it never sees the light of day, you mean explosions?" Elias replied simply. Tessa sighed. "Why is it always explosions with you?" "Because explosions work," Elias said, clapping her on the shoulder. "Now let's move." The infiltration was textbook, at first. Tessa and Lyrian expertly navigated the station's systems, shutting down cameras and rerouting patrols to clear the way. Meanwhile, Elias and Renalis pushed deeper into the station, their progress marked by brief, intense skirmishes with syndicate guards. Renalis's crystalline light made her a beacon in the dim corridors, but it also served as a weapon, disorienting their enemies with bursts of brilliance. "You know," Elias said as they ducked behind cover, "for someone who's never held a blaster, you're surprisingly good at this." Renalis gave him a sidelong glance, her crystalline features catching the faint light. "Leadership requires adaptation. Besides, I have no intention of letting you take all the credit for this mission." Elias laughed, a genuine warm sound that echoed through the metallic hallways. "Fair enough. Just don't outshine me too much, Your Majesty." When they reached the gravimatrix core, Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The device was massive, its dark surface pulsing with energy that seemed to bend the space around it. A low hum resonated through the chamber, vibrating in his chest like an unspoken threat. "This is it," Renalis said, her voice tinged with both awe and dread. Elias pulled out a compact explosive device, his expression turning serious. "We set this here. Get out, and let the eclipse dawn do the rest. Sound good?" Before Renalis could respond, a voice echoed from behind them. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." They turned to see a syndicate commander flanked by a squad of soldiers. His armor gleamed in the core's distorted light, and his weapon was trained squarely on Elias. Elias raised his hand slowly. "I don't suppose we could talk about this," the commander sneered. "The syndicate doesn't negotiate with insects." "Good," Elias said, his hand darting toward his sidearm. "Neither do we." The ensuing fight was a blur of motion and light. Renalis used her abilities to disorient the soldiers, while Elias's quick reflexes kept the commander occupied. Despite the odds, they managed to hold their ground, and with a well-placed shot, Elias sent the commander sprawling. "Now," he said, setting the explosive on the core, "we really need to leave." The escape was chaos. Alarms blared, and the station's defenses roared to life as the team regrouped and sprinted for the eclipse dawn. Tessa and Lyrian provided covering fire, their movements synchronized despite the hail of enemy fire. "Elias!" Tessa shouted as they boarded the ship. "Tell me you actually set the timer this time." "Of course," Elias said, feigning offense. "What do you take me for?" "A man who once forgot his own boots," Tessa shot back. The eclipse dawn tore away from the station just as the explosive detonated. The gravimatrix core imploded, its energy consuming the station in a dazzling cascade of light. The shockwave rocked the ship, but Harold's steady control kept them on course. "Mission accomplished," Elias said, sinking into his chair with a satisfied grin. In the days that followed, the victory felt bittersweet. The syndicate had been dealt a significant blow, but the cost of the mission weighed heavily on the crew. Still, it was a step toward the alliance Renalis and Elias had worked so hard to forge. On the observation deck, Elias found Renalis gazing at the stars. He joined her, the silence between them comfortable. "You've changed," she said finally, her gaze still on the cosmos. "Yeah?" Elias asked. "How so?" "You see the galaxy differently now," she said. "Not just as a soldier or a captain, but as someone who believes in the possibility of peace." Elias shrugged, though her words clearly moved him. "Maybe I've had a good teacher." Renalis turned to him, her crystalline eyes reflecting the starlight. "And maybe you've taught me to believe in humanity's potential." They stood in silence, the weight of their journey shared between them. Somewhere in the distance, a new star flickered to life, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope.